Hi, I'm Nick Palmisano.
And I'm a donkey, Shrek.
And this is the Bad News Network. Israel and Palestine have had a very brutal week in their ongoing conflict in Gaza, with 12 Israelis and over 200 Palestinians killed and many more injured. While 70% of Americans remain in lockstep with Israel, a growing percentage of Democrats, especially younger Democrats, are beginning to side with Palestine. A major reason for this is the significantly disparate size and the death tolls of the two sides, and the fact that because Hamas typically intermingles weaponry and citizenry, we've seen an increase in the deaths of women and children in Palestine. None of this is good. The situation is extremely complex. Presidents have been trying to help solve this problem for generations. Usually, American interference has made it worse. I often try to use BNN to try to break down complex issues as simply as possible, but in this situation, it's just so ugly that it's hard to talk about one component without catching threads of other issues that can keep you talking for hours. I'm gonna try anyway. Please, 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 people that know a ton about this conflict, appreciate that I am trying to give a Cliff's Notes version. As one person I spoke with on Twitter this week said, you can literally write an entire book just on the conflict the two sides have over olive trees. So here goes. At one point, 3% of the population in Israel/Palestine were Jews. The rest were pretty much Sunni Muslims. Palestine has never really been a country. It was a hodgepodge of settlements that were remnants of the Ottoman Empire. After World War I, the British carved out the area as a territory and created the borders of what we now think of as Palestine. Around this time, a philosopher by the name of Theodor Herzl published a book called The Jewish State, outlining his vision for an autonomous Jewish nation. A lot of people began considering Palestine as a possible location for this state. The idea stuck. At that time, about half of all Jewish Zionists were willing to have a Jewish state anywhere, but the other half were fixated on Palestine. So European Jews began moving to Palestine and buying land off of Palestinians to begin small Jewish settlements. Some Palestinians were cool with it, others were not and wrote about it in newspapers or complained about it in the town squares. Still others took it further though, with violence and vengeance, not only against Jews, but against the Palestinians who had sold them land. After World War I, the Brits issued the Balfour Declaration, which kind of teased that the British government supported a Jewish Palestine. That declaration led to more Jews moving to Palestine, which in turn led to more Sunni Palestinian opposition and more violence. The Palestinians started attacking the Brits, so they tried to weasel out of it and throw the Jews under the bus. So then the Jews started attacking the Brits. Nice job, England. So now you had Palestinians hating the Jews, European Jews hating the Palestinians, Arab Jews kind of stuck in the middle, and everyone hating the Brits. Violence started picking up in 1929, and the Jews began to settle aggressively. This led to a Palestinian uprising, which the Brits crushed. To keep the place stable, they then outlawed further European Jewish immigration. Then World War II kicked off. The Holocaust occurs and many Jews die because the Brits kept them from fleeing to Palestine, which led to immense Jewish hostility towards the Brits. The Jews began attacking the British with terrorist attacks, including killing 100 people at British headquarters in 1947. This led the newly formed UN to barter with Palestine and offer an agreement that named Jerusalem a shared city. This was the first time that anyone had offered any acknowledgement of a Jewish claim to statehood, albeit a shared one. The Palestinians immediately rejected the proposal, and after the British pulled out in 1948, all hell broke loose. The Palestinians banded with other Arabs and tried to wipe out the Jews, and the Jews, in turn, proclaimed Israel a newly formed country and fought back, defeating them. After watching their fellow Jews, including friends and families, being murdered by the millions in the Holocaust, and now having had to just fight off the Arab world in an attempt to do the exact same thing, the newly formed Israelis were in no mood to f*** around, and instead of looking for an equitable solution, claimed 75% of what was formerly Palestine. Both sides were right and wrong. The Israelis were not going to be wiped off the face of the earth as the Germans had attempted. The Palestinians were not going to let a foreign invader claim their land. Neither could see the other's perspective. This resulting war left two areas, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, full of Palestinian refugees with no country, no passport, and no rights. The problem largely still remains today. Israel, meanwhile, built a flourishing state that everyone around it wanted to kill. And the Arab nations tried, over and over and over again throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, most notoriously during the 6 Days War and the Yom Kippur War. Finally, in 1993, Yasser Arafat from Palestine and Prime Minister Rabin from Israel agreed to peace talks. It was historic. Unfortunately, no one really wanted to compromise other than those two. Israel didn't want to give up land to its hostile neighbors. Palestine wanted more land than would allow Israel to exist. Then an Israeli shot Rabin for selling out Israel. Violence spiked again. Netanyahu becomes the prime minister, and he is adamantly opposed to compromise. Car bombs, explosive vests, and public square attacks become the norm. Then came the game changer for Israel. In 2005, Israel built or reinforced massive walls, keeping the Palestinians trapped in Gaza and the West Bank. Israeli casualties went from 1 Israeli death for every 5 Palestinian deaths to 1 Israeli death for every 20 Palestinian deaths. More recently, the Iron Dome missile defense system has decreased Israeli deaths further. And that brings us to today. The whole thing is ugly. If Israel's humane and lets the Palestinians back into their world, more Israelis are about to die. If the Palestinians acknowledge the current boundaries and cease violence, will their world ever get better? Will they ever reclaim what they believe is stolen land? I always try to convert it to American terms. Imagine if Mexico started lobbing missiles into Texas, killing a few hundred people. Would we be careful to wage a fair response? Or would the northern edge of Mexico be a parking lot? You know the answer. There'd be a 50-mile DMZ. Hell, we lost 3,000 civilians on 9/11 and we've waged war for 20 years. We know what we would do. Now imagine that Canada came across the border and settled New York and said, this is ours now. Would we let that fly? Or would we fight like hell to get them off our land? Again, you know the answer. Now, in both instances, imagine some of your family members were killed by these attacks. Your son or your daughter in Texas, your mother or father in New York. How do you hit the reset button? How do you think logically? You can't. It's raw emotion forever. And that's what this conflict is, a choice that's easy for us to make in America as Monday morning quarterbacks from the comfort of our computer screens. Sure, be more charitable to the Palestinians until they kill your kid. Sure, give Israel a break about the settlements and simply focus on a new Palestine with smaller borders, except they killed your wife and your father. Sure, take down the walls and live together in one state, except you both know more people will die. It's simply not easy.
Philadelphia, famous for their cheesesteaks, the Liberty Bell, Rocky, and now giant bird-murdering buildings. Apparently the beautiful skyline of Philly that is gazed upon by thousands of people is actually a minefield of death for migrating birds. Last spring, thousands of birds passing through the skies of Philly were killed after the lights from the tops of these buildings distracted them from their flight path, causing them to crash into windows and plummet to their death on the street below. Now the city will impose a voluntary measure coordinated by Birds Save Philly to dim the lights of the large buildings in order to not kill even more birds this year. And man, are people raving about it. Robert Peck, whose name sounds like he might just be a bird wearing glasses, is from the Academy of Natural Sciences of Drexel University and said that most migratory birds navigate by light, like the sun or the moon, so that the bright lights of the city can be very distracting for the birds. On October 2nd of last year, there was a mass collision event where thousands of birds struck different buildings and rained down on the people of Philly. With it being 2020, people just thought this was another sign that the world was ending. Or maybe the plot of Alfred Hitchcock's movie The Birds playing out in real life. Or even that the city of Philly was haunted. But before people could cry foul, the nerds of science came up with a solution. For the next 10 days, Philly will dim their lights overnight in order to help these birds stay on course. 33 other cities across the country have also pledged to do similar things in order to help fight light pollution, which I had no idea was a thing. Seagulls eat actual trash off the beach, so they're doing their part to clean the environment, so I guess this is a small thing we can do to help out. Even though I don't give a single f*** about birds, especially the Philadelphia Eagles. You guys suck.
Just when you thought you'd never have to brush your teeth ever again, get the Colgate ready because the masks are coming off. The CDC's recently announced that vaccinated people can, for the most part, ditch their masks. Man, I sure do love it when the scientific community uses terms like "for the most part" that are super vague and don't really give a definitive answer. Currently, 60% of American adults have gotten at least one dose of the COVID vaccine, and additionally, 3.5 million kids from ages 12 to 17 have gotten their first dose. This news marks positive steps towards the country reaching herd immunity, allowing us to return to some sort of semblance of regular life. For the people that haven't gotten the vaccine, I will not tell you what you have to do with your body. Everyone has their own reason to get it or not get it. I got the vaccine, not because I'm scared to get COVID. I'm in pretty good shape and health and don't have to worry about side effects that come along with getting COVIDed. But I do have family members who actually can't get the vaccine because they have compromised immune systems. So I'm doing my part to keep them safe. From my time in the military, I can also understand why some members of the military might not want to get vaccinated. We've all been guinea pigs for different things, whether you're talking about anthrax or Agent Orange for the previous generation, or the fact that they're still pretending that burn pits didn't have a negative impact on people. I'm just glad that things are looking like they might go back to the pre-COVID days where we can smile at each other's ugly faces. I'm just going to have to make sure I'm not doing a bunch of weird mouth movements and licking my lips while looking people in the eyes like I did while wearing a mask. Obviously, the mask rules are still largely up to state and business mandates. If the state says you don't have to wear a mask, but Target says you need one in the shop, Target wins out in this instance. I know a lot of people like to bitch about how they think this is unconstitutional, but remember the whole no shirt, no shoes, no service deal that companies used to employ to keep the hippies out? This is the same thing, except now you're the hippie. If you have a problem with it, instead of screaming at a 17-year-old girl at Subway who's just trying to do her job through tears, just go somewhere else. Subway sucks anyway. Now that companies are becoming more relaxed with the mask rules and trusting their customers who aren't wearing masks or actually vaccinated, I see even more fights on the horizon. I'm going to say having the old lady watching the door at Walmart police people about being vaccinated is probably not the way to go. But I look forward to it.
I've had a lot of close calls almost not making it to the bathroom in my life. Those early morning wake-up sweats after all night of drunkenly eating about 4,000 calories worth of Taco Bell, or when those Lay's Wow chips came out and no one wanted to tell me that eating half a bag would give you Mount St. Helen-worthy eruption in your pants. But at no point did my bowels turn against me to the point where I almost lost my job. This was not the case, however, for a 36-year-old bullet train conductor on Japan's Tokaido Shinseki railway line. The unidentified conductor felt the rumble from down under and knew he only had seconds to make it to the bathroom before disaster struck. The train conductor handed the reins over to his co-conductor, who didn't have a license to operate the train, so that he could use the bathroom. The train was traveling at almost 100 miles per hour and there was about 160 passengers on at the time. Apparently my man was in the bathroom for 3 minutes taking a porcelain bowl cracking due to his stomach ache. I don't know who snitched on this guy, but that's kind of messed up. I hope whoever did poops their pants while at work so they can be ridiculed for the rest of their life. If I got in trouble every time I sprinted away from my desk to blow up the bathroom, I would not have a job. Senior official Masahiro Hayatsu apologized to reporters for the incident, saying that the act was extremely inappropriate and next time he will just make sure the conductor shits his pants and stays at the helm of the train. Railway incidents in Japan are rare, and the last one that took place killed 170 people when the train derailed. So this situation was bad, but it could have been much shittier.
A study done by the World Health Organization showed that overwork killed more than 700,000 people in a year, citing that long work hours pose health risks such as stroke and heart disease. Look, I've been pulling in 80-hour weeks for as long as time and I'm doing great, so are my employees. Right, Pokey? Pokey? He's fine. The study showed that people who work more than 55 hours a week face an estimated 35% higher risk of a stroke and a 17% higher risk of dying of heart disease. These numbers are highest in men and women who are middle-aged or older, a good reason to hire kids right out of college and work them as much as you can until they start to wither away, then send them to a farm to live out the rest of their days. In the United States, less than 5% of the population is exposed to work weeks that are longer than 40 hours, unlike other countries where that's simply normal practice. In the past couple of years, South Korea reduced their numbers of weekly working hours from 68 to 52 in order to boost the country's productivity and encourage people to start getting jiggy with it, and increase the country's birth rate. Japan, another country notorious for their long work weeks, even has their own word for death from overwork, which includes people dying from stroke, heart attack, and even taking their own lives from overwork. So I'm not sure what people here are complaining about. Yeah, I might ask you to work a couple of hours or 30. And yes, I have a megaphone at my desk to make sure everyone stays productive, and sometimes I judo throw people standing around the kitchen for too long. But hey, I buy you cappuccinos and cookies sometimes, and the occasional muffin, and every now and then, so you're welcome. The WHO says numbers like this tend to tick upwards after an economic crisis like the housing market crash or the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses who need to recover financially will often impose longer work hours in order to curb the amount of money lost and keep their business afloat. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus whose parents thought he was destined to be a Game of Thrones character, said that no job is worth the risk of stroke or heart disease and recommended that everyone just sit on their ass for the rest of their life. This study did not mention any of the dietary or exercise habits of the individuals working these long hours, but I have to imagine that also plays a part in the rise of the health risks. It takes a lot to be successful in business. I can tell you that over 15 years of entrepreneurship, there have been weeks and months even where I was in the office late every night. You know, in the Ranger Up warehouse back in the day, if it was Christmas time, we didn't leave that place until 2 or 3 in the morning because we had to make sure every single order gets out. But you have to find a balance between that. If you're working long weeks, then make sure you're eating right. Make sure you take time to exercise, even if it's in the middle of the day. Take time to sit with your kids and play games, to take out your significant other for a date, because entrepreneurship is so intense that it's easy to get lost in it and not actually live any of your life. I know this from experience. Enjoy the things that you're working so hard for. You aren't doing anyone any favors if you push yourself past the breaking point. Now, Pokey, stop dying. It's your turn to do the news.
Alan Minish, a 61-year-old Alaskan man, was doing a land survey near Golconda when he unknowingly walked upon a brown bear who was ready to throw hands. Alan was alone and about half a mile away from his car when the bear rushed him. When Minish saw the bear, he tried to hide behind some shrubs, but you know, since they're tiny shrubs with about 0 tensile strength and practically see-through, the bear quickly won that game of hide and seek and was on top of Minish. He thought it would be a good idea to grab the bear by the lower jaw so that the bear could not bite his hand, citing that if you grab a dog by the lower jaw, it can't bite you. The bear must have never met a dog because he promptly bit a hole in Minish's hand. This dude is one tough motherfucker, because even after that, he remained conscious, stayed calm, and laid in the fetal position until the bear left. Minish used his t-shirt and vest to wrap up his head and wipe the blood from his eye, and used his cell phone to call for help. He was able to do all this even though he said the pain was unbearable. Minish was flown to Providence Medical Center in Anchorage, where he is currently recovering. Even though the bear him up good, he is in good spirits and is even starting to joke about the experience to make light of everything that happened. Minish is tough as nails. When I get caught in an arm triangle that's too tight, I tap immediately. When a piece of dust gets in my eye, I spend the rest of the day about it and using eye drops. The bear left the scene and troopers say there is no efforts underway to find the bear, which makes sense because, you know, it's a bear and it's his woods. Maybe we should just leave him the alone.
John Holt, an officer from the Gloucester Sheriff's Office, responded to an incident of an overturned vehicle during Mother's Day weekend. When he got to the scene, John could tell that the people in the car were in trouble. He ran up to the vehicle to see 2 kids inside who were both screaming because their mother's head had become pinned under the sunroof of the SUV and was being crushed. After coaxing the kids out of the car, John did something that is almost impossible. He lifted the SUV off the woman's head. Let me say that again in case you didn't hear me the first time. He lifted a SUV off of a woman's head. After trying once and not being able to lift it, John gave himself a quick pep talk, switched his stance so he could use more of his body to lift the vehicle, and said, "All you have to do is stand up." I'm not sure if John had some sort of inert Herculean strength, or maybe has more adrenaline in his body than any other human being on the planet, or maybe he's got the world's biggest balls, but man, that is bad. John, who is an Army veteran, said that his military training kicked in and would not allow him to quit and let this woman die. I know when you think about the scene, you might think John has the physique of The Rock or even of someone who wouldn't shut the up about doing CrossFit, but that's not the case. Somehow this man with a killer dad bod, who normally looks like he has the combined strength of Bert and Ernie, did what most people couldn't. The entire event was captured on John's body cam, and he can be heard giving everything he had to lift the SUV and save this woman. But John's badness doesn't stop there. On March 24th of last year, he saved a woman and her child from a burning building. Is this guy actually a superhero? John, you're a bona fide badass who everyone should look up to. We here at BNN salute you.
This week, an 11-year-old girl fought off a knife-wielding human piece of that was trying to kidnap her. Alyssa was playing in the grass while waiting for the school bus when a man in a white Dodge Journey drove up. He got out of the car holding a knife and ran after Alyssa, who tried to run but was caught by the suspect, who has been identified as Jared Paul Stranga. Stranga, who looks like he smells like moldy cheese and probably sweats constantly, has a long history of criminal offenses, including sexual offense with a child and a child neglect conviction involving sexual allegations and a violated probation. So you know, general scum of the earth type. There are people still in jail for selling $100 worth of weed 5 years ago, but someone like this with a rap sheet like this is able to walk around near other human beings and children? That seems a little f***ed up. When Stranga grabbed Alyssa, he tried taking her back to his car, but this bad little girl fought like hell, causing Stranga to trip to the ground, releasing both of them. When Alyssa broke free, she ran as fast as she could away from Stranga, who hurried back to his car and drove away. This was all caught on security tape, so police knew exactly what car to look for and exactly who they needed to find. Alyssa was playing with blue slime at the time she was almost kidnapped, and when Stranga grabbed her, she rubbed the blue slime all over his arms to give more evidence to the police to help find him. A technique she said she learned from Law & Order SVU, which might be the first time anyone has learned anything from that show. But good on Alyssa, because when police showed up at Stranga's house, he was wearing the same clothes he had on during the attempted kidnapping, and he also had the blue slime all over his arms. So he's not just a piece of he's a stupid piece of This wasn't the first interaction between Alyssa and Stranga though. 2 weeks prior to the incident, Alyssa told school officials and her mom that a strange man had approached her at the bus stop and made her feel uncomfortable. Alyssa's mother walked her to the bus stop every day until then, but on this day of the incident, she decided not to walk Alyssa there because she thought she would be safe. Luckily for the two, she raised a strong little warrior who wasn't going to let this pile of garbage get away with her. Alyssa said she is proud of herself and that she thinks Detective Olivia Benson from SVU would be proud of her. Alyssa, everyone is proud of you. Let's hope the kind people of prison treat Stranga how he tried to treat others.
And finally, in Florida man news, 30-year-old Floridian Kyle Griffith gave himself the old Cheddar Bob treatment and shot himself in the leg while shopping at Walmart. Griffith was carrying a pistol in his waistband when he bent down to grab some soda and his gun went off. This wouldn't have happened if he had had his pistol in a holster or had the safety on, but when you are a Florida man, you always forego safety and go full send. After he shot himself, Kyle slid the gun across the bloody floor to his brother, which must have looked pretty cool like a scene from Die Hard. Unfortunately for Kyle, this was witnessed by multiple people, including a police officer. Officers asked Kyle if he had a permit to carry the weapon, to which he responded saying he did have one, but it was for the state of Virginia. The officers didn't have to watch Maury to know that this was a lie. Kyle had been previously arrested in March for carrying and concealing a firearm with no permit, so at least he was keeping it on brand. Kyle was charged with felony carrying a concealed firearm and had his pistol confiscated by the police. Kyle's pretty lucky in this situation, as he could have killed himself or anyone at the store due to his lack of gun safety measures and just generally being a dumb. Kyle will probably be out of jail soon enough and will probably be arrested for shooting himself in the other leg, for that is the fate of this gentleman. We salute you once again, Florida man. And with that, I'm Nick Palmisano.
And I'm Alex Pokey.
And this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already, and folks, it's great to be back. As always, you can get 25% off rangerup.com when you use the code BNN. Have a great weekend.